It was a cold, dark night in Igbo land. The moon was hiding behind thick clouds, and the wind carried whispers through the trees. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. The village of Umakis was silent, with only the sounds of crickets and distant owl hoots disturbing the night. Ikin, a strong and hard-working young man, was returning from a wedding in the neighboring village. He had been drinking palm wine and eating roasted meat with his friends, laughing and dancing until it was late. Now, as he drove his old but steady car along the lonely village road, his eyes were heavy with sleep. The road was narrow, surrounded by thick bushes and tall trees. Ikin hummed a song to keep himself awake. The night was too quiet, too still. Something about it made him uneasy. But he shook off the feeling and focused on the road ahead. Then, suddenly, he saw something, a figure standing by the roadside. At first, he thought his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. But as he got closer, he realized it was a woman. A very beautiful woman. She stood under the dim moonlight, wearing a tight red dress that hugged her calves. Her long black hair flowed like a river, then her skin shone like fresh palm oil. Her eyes sparkled like the stars, then her lips were full and red. Ikin's heart skipped a beat. What was such a beautiful woman doing alone at this time of the night? She raised her hand and waved at him. "Brother, please help me," she said, her voice as soft as the evening breeze. Ikin slowed down and pulled over. He leaned out of his window and looked at her closely. "What are you doing here alone in the middle of the night?" he asked. She smiled, and for a moment Ikin felt as if the whole world had stopped. Her beauty was almost unreal. "I am lost," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Please, I need a place to stay for the night." Ikin hesitated. His mother had warned him many times about picking up strangers at night. He had heard stories of spirits and demons that appeared in human form. But looking at the woman before him, all his fears disappeared. She looked harmless, delicate even. "All right," he said, opening the car door. "Get in." The woman's smile widened as she stepped into the car. A strange, sweet scent filled the air, the mixture of fresh rain and something wild, like the deep forest after a storm. As Ikin drove, he tried to make conversation. "What is your name?" he asked. She chuckled softly. "Names do not matter in the night," she said mysteriously. Ikin frowned. "Where do you come from?" She turned to look at him, her eyes glowing slightly in the darkness. "I belong to many places." Her voice was soothing, almost hypnotic. Ikin found himself smiling without knowing why. Soon, they reached Ikin's house. It was a small but well-built bungalow, standing at the edge of the village near the thick forest. He led her inside and offered her food and water, but she shook her head. "I do not eat at night," she said, her eyes twinkling. Ikin chuckled. "That's strange. Are you not hungry?" She only smiled and looked around the room as if she was searching for something. Then she turned back to him. "Shall we rest?" she asked, her voice soft and inviting. Ikin felt his heart race. He had never been this close to such a beautiful woman. He reached out and touched her hand. It was cold. Too cold. A shiver ran down his spine. He pulled his hand back slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, but something about her had changed. The warmth in her eyes was gone, replaced by something unreadable. Ikin pushed away his uneasiness and led her to his bed. As they lay down, sleep took over him quickly. But his dreams were strange. He dreamt of a giant black cobra slithering around his house, its hisses filling the air. It moved slowly, its red eyes glowing in the darkness. The ground shook with every movement it made. Ikin tried to run, but his legs felt heavy. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then, the snake turned towards him, raising its head. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air. It stared at him for a long time, as if studying him. Ikin struggled to wake up. He felt something heavy pressing down on his chest. His breath came in short gasps. Then, he heard a loud hissing sound. His eyes snapped open. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. The beautiful woman was no longer beside him. In her place was a giant black cobra, its body coiled on his bed, its head raised high. Its red eyes burned into his, and its forked tongue flicked in and out rapidly. Ikin could not move. His body trembled as the snake swayed gently, watching him. Then, before his very eyes, the snake began to change. Its long body twisted and shifted, shrinking and reshaping. Within seconds, the woman was standing before him again, her red dress flowing like liquid, her eyes glowing in the dim light. Ikin gasped, unable to believe what he had just seen. "You have been kind to me, Ikin," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "So, I will not harm you. But never pick up a stranger in the middle of the night again." His heart pounded like a drum. He could not speak. His throat was dry with fear. The woman turned and walked towards the door. But as she moved, her legs disappeared, and her body slithered like a snake. With one final hiss, she vanished into the darkness. By morning, the king was gone from the village. He packed his things and left without telling anyone why. Those who saw him later said he was never the same again. His eyes held a permanent fear, then he never traveled at night again. The people of Umakis whispered about the story for years. Some said the woman was a spirit. Others said she was a goddess testing the kindness of men. But one thing was certain, no one in the village ever stopped for a stranger at night again. Comment what you learned about the story and subscribe to this YouTube channel to continue.